Okay, good morning. So today's lesson is all about validation, which means that we're checking the values that the user types in to make sure that they are sensible. If we get validation right, we can make our programs much easier to use, give better feedback, and be more reliable as well. So there are different types of validation. There's a presence check, a length check, a range check, and a lookup check. It's basically anything that the user types in, we have to assume that the user is stupid. Most of the time, it will be you testing your program in your computing lessons, but in the real world, you make a program and anyone can use it. So you have to assume that people will use it well, that they'll know what they're doing, but also people have got no clue what they're doing, and they'll type in all sorts of random gubbins, and your program should still be able to cope. So presence check means, it's like I've just done that in the register. I say your name and you say, here, sir. That's a presence check. It's the same with the user input. If the user is asked to type in a number between 1 and 10, a presence check would be, has the user typed in anything at all? A length check would be what it sounds like, really. If you ask the user to type in 6 characters, you can do a length check to see have they typed in 0 characters or 3 characters or 20 characters. So you could argue, actually, that a presence check is a special case of a length check. And then we've got some range checks and lookup checks, which I'm sure we'll come to a little bit later. So we know how to get input into our program, because we just use input in Python. We know that input returns a string. Even if sometimes we want to get an integer from it, input still returns a string, but we can change it, cast it, convert it to any other data type. Sometimes the user types in stuff that we don't want. So if we ask them to type in a number and they type in Bob, it's going to crash. So that's where validation comes in. If we get it right, our program is going to be able to cope without crashing. So we can check if data is suitable, if it's in an expected format, if it's within a certain range. And then a warning at the end, just because it's valid doesn't mean it's correct. So for example, if the user's asked to type in a number between 3 and 30 and they type in tiger, then it's easy to check if they've got it right, because if they've got it wrong, it'll crash. But if they type in 300, it is valid, but it's not correct. It's outside of the suitable range. Okay, so how do we do validation? Range check, we've talked about that, or no, we haven't. We said we'd leave that for later, so this is later. Is it within a certain range? As in, is it between the minimum and the maximum? Length check, how many characters is it? Presence check, is it there at all? And lookup check, possibly the hardest, but it's not that hard to implement. Is it one of a certain range? So for example, if you say, would you like Mr. Dring to say a joke, yes or no? Then you can do a length check to see what the user types in, to see if they've done anything at all, which would be a presence check. You can't really do a range check for yes or no because it's not numerical, but you can do a lookup check. Did the user type in yes? Did the user type in no? If not, it's invalid. So range check examples. I didn't give us any Python code, but temperature could be a valid amount. It can't go less than minus 240 degrees C. A length check could be for passwords, has to be at least 8 characters. Presence check could be for passwords. Like you have to put in something for a field. I'm sure you'll have seen that when signing up for stuff. Or you can have blacklists and whitelists. Interestingly, the tech community is trying to get rid of these because they consider this terminology racist. But a whitelist is a list of things you are allowed to have, like yes and no. And a blacklist would be a list of things you're not allowed to have, like you check and see if someone's typed in a swear word or something like that. So this is what it looks like in Python. Oh gosh, here we go. So we have a range check here to see if it's if it's above a certain value. Good. This is a length check here because we're checking the length of username to see that it's greater than or equal to 3 characters. Well done. So we have a presence check down here. We ask the user to put in a password, and if the password is not equal to nothing, then it's valid. Otherwise, it's invalid because it's failed the presence check. And this is a better version because this only asks the user to type in once. This time we're saying, right, I want the user to type something in, but we're going to keep asking them to type something in until it's valid. Or here, we ask them to type it in once, and we're going to keep asking them to type it in until it's valid. So the user experience is much better now. They don't just get one opportunity. They can keep trying it. We'll come back to lookup checks later because it's too much to take in one go. So what do we have to do for activity 1? Here we see a phone number must be given. That sounds like a presence check to me. A valid input could be the school phone number. An invalid input could be just an empty string. Do you get the idea? You tell me what type of check, a presence check, a range check, a lookup check, or a something else check which I've forgotten. I'll put the list up on the screen. Give me valid and invalid input for all of these scenarios. Let's have a look at activity 2. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types or 5 examples of validation implemented in Python. So good examples that will be useful for us in the next activity. And we need to work out what type of check it is. So I won't do the top one, I'm going to go for this one. Choice equals input, enter, cross or naught. And then we're checking to see if the choice is equal to an empty string. Well, that looks like a presence check to me, because we're checking to see if it's anything at all. And if it's just an empty string, it's invalid. So you need to have a look at the code and try and work out which one it is. I'll pause you in a couple of minutes. You'll notice activity 3, I think, has got too much missing. It should tell you in this column what type of validation you're supposed to do. So I'll confirm that with you in a moment. So apologies, the Word document I've shared with you had this column missing, and we need that to be able to do the question. So please do write these down. For 3A, we need to implement a length check, and there's some gaps in here that we need to be able to put in. I think this is an image, isn't it? That's rather frustrating. So you'll have to type it out yourself in Thonny or Moo. It's just been pointed out to me that you do have the code for this. You don't have to write it all out yourself. You can find it on the VLE. It is CT21 Activity 3A Student, so that you can work through this. And it should have each of the ones that you need. Come on, Thonny, where have you gone? Here it is. So you can just fill in the gaps for me here. So this first one needs to be a length check. So I'm going to put a comment in to explain what we're going to do. So how do we do a length check? Well, that's the expression that we put in brackets here. So if the length of name is not equal to 5, then it's invalid. Is that right? F-I-V-E. Oh dear, I can't spell. We only want 4 letters. And then you need to just make sure that you're implementing the right type of lookup check. You have got some examples up here, but we'll pause and go through if anyone asks any questions. So just going to go through the lookup check on here. Just change it to spell vanilla properly. The way that most people implement this is to say something like, if the flavor is not equal to one valid option and the flavor is not equal to another valid option. But if you've got 20 valid options, that's quite a lot of if statements that you've got to combine with your Boolean logic, your and, your or, and your not. You can do it a little bit more simply. You can say, if the flavor is not in, and then give it a list of acceptable values. So is it in C or V? So let's see what's happening here. The in operator will say, is this value in this list? And if it is, then it will replace this whole expression with true. I put the not in the wrong place, sorry. The not needs to go in front of it. So if not flavor in here means, is this flavor not in this list? So it's just a more shorthand but still relatively readable way which is much more extendable if you end up adding extra flavors like strawberry or raspberry, rather than having to add if flavor is not equal to S and flavor is not equal to R, etc., etc., etc. But you write whatever is easier for you to understand. All right, I just want to go through 3B. It doesn't give you the code in the Word document, but you can find the code from the VLE. It's 3B student here. And then if we open it up, we have some code that needs to be put into the right order. So let's just screenshot this. Come on. Plop that in here. So this is all messed up and in not in the right order. And I know a lot of students struggle with these types of questions because sometimes you're not sure what it's supposed to do, and you've got to get your head into the mindset of the person who wrote the code in the first place, which can be challenging. But there are lots of tips that really help. So the purpose of this is to go through those tips. First of all, let's just try and run it and see what happens. What do we want to happen? Well, we want the user to be able to choose a flavor for chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, or quit. And if they put in the wrong value or an invalid value, then it will give them a sensible thing. So let's see. Print the menu. We can't do that until we know what the menu is. So we find where the menu is defined, and we move that to the top. So keyboard shortcuts here. You can use the mouse to select. I find the mouse slow and imprecise, so I use home on the keyboard to go to the beginning of the line, end to go to the end of the line, or shift and home, or shift and end to select whilst I press those. I see lots of people doing Control-C and then pasting and then deleting, but that gets confusing because you've got two copies of it here. Do get into the habit of using cut instead, please. Control-X to cut and then Control-V. Okay, so that's better. We know what the menu is, so we can display it. Seems pointless displaying it twice. Maybe we should display a message. Please choose from the menu. That makes sense, doesn't it? Then, while the choice not in the menu, well, we don't know what the choice is yet, and we don't know what the options is yet. So let's do this first. And we don't know what the choice is. So sequence means we have to do things in order. We can't check and see if this is or isn't in that until we know what both of them are. So the choice has to be one of these. I don't know which one's going to go first, choice or choose a flavor. Let's go for choice. Control-X. Great. So now we can say while the choice is not in the options, and what do we want to happen? Well, we could just plop that in there. So what's this going on? Well, remember, Edexcel likes us to declare our variables before we use them. So I'm just going to put the choice is up here. And will it work? Who knows? Let's see. Invalid syntax. No. What have we got wrong here? Where is the invalid syntax? On line 1. Oh, because there's an extra bracket in there. That's horrible, isn't it? There we go. It looks like it's working now. So if I type in a W, it says choose a flavor. But if I type in Q, it's going to quit. If I type in V, it's also valid. Yeah, great. So the key thing here is remember Control-X to cut, Control-V to paste, and then use your clues. Look at what the line includes in terms of your variables. If it mentions a variable that you haven't defined or declared yet, just move that above it so that you've got it when you need it. Okay, so once you finish working through all of the challenges, do make sure that your Word document is saved, and we'll submit it to the Half Term 4 Algorithms and Programming 4 section on the VLE.